Hello and welcome to our 30 Under 30 live chat of our new class. I'm Tina Estrada. I'm a 30 and 30 alumni, currently technical staff at Pleasanton Rage Club in California, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. Today's pair of 30 Under 30 participants will be discussing the role high school soccer is playing in the landscape of today's game. So before we get started, I'm just going to have Jeremy and Barrett introduce themselves and where they're at currently.
My name is Jeremy Hayes. Currently, I'm an assistant coach at Mount Vista High School in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, and I also work for Real Colorado, a club, where I work as a specialized skills coach, where I'll come in and run some recreational sessions, but also work with the head coach a little bit. And the big thing about high school for me is I had a lot of success in high school. Truly love the experience that you get from high school, so I'm happy to share my experience with it.
My name is Barrett Keelian. Originally from Raleigh, North Carolina. Moved to Alaska about 2008. In 2010, I started coaching high school soccer at A.J. Diamond High School. And 3 years after, I've been coaching varsity boys head soccer past 2 years. I coach at Cook Inlet Soccer Club out of Anchorage, Alaska. It's actually interesting because I have 3 teams that do not play high school soccer now: 01 boys, 04 girls, and 05 boys. So it's been a little bit on the other end of the spectrum this season. But coach for the state of Alaska for ODP, and excited to be here.
Great. And this is a reminder for viewers: if you guys have any questions during today's live chat, please tweet them. And use the hashtag NSCAA Live. So let's get started. Our first question for you two is, today's high school students, they're so busy and often involved in many different facets on campus. So how do you deal with the challenges of coaching multi-sport athletes that split their commitments between various different sports and activities?
I'll take that first. So I'm a big believer in the high school experience, all about giving those extracurricular stuff that you can do on the side. So we kind of have a philosophy that we encourage students to join any clubs that they're interested in, other sports, especially in the off season. What I think the question is alluding to is those in-season commitments that make it difficult, and that's kind of that gray area. Especially at the JV and Fresh South level, it's a little bit more lenient, obviously. You kind of want to work with them, but remaining tact in terms of having soccer be their commitment. The high school I coach at, we're currently at a level, the 5A level, which is the top division in Colorado, where if you're not training with the team 5 days a week, keeping your form, you're going to lose kind of a little bit of ability. Not necessarily lose it, but just in terms of form go down. So if it gets to that point where it's affecting your ability, you need to have that conversation mid-season. And this is always addressed definitely at the beginning, right around tryouts, whenever it pops up. Have that conversation that if it does affect us, maybe we need to rethink about it. So.
High school soccer in Alaska takes place March through May. Players wait all year to play high school soccer, whether it's varsity or JV. We go indoors. We're stuck in gyms for the first month of our season in March. Our players usually bugging to get outside and get running a little bit and get back to soccer a little bit more often as a 5 to 6 day week schedule. For us, the big thing at the beginning of the season is communication and balance. Our biggest competitor is track and field. We've got some soccer players that are just super athletes that are probably going to go out to play college track and field, or maybe a little bit of soccer on the side, more soccer and track and field on the side. So for us, it's establishing a clear line of communication. Our schedules are very consistent when we train, when our games are, when track trains, when their meets are. So it's important for us as coaches to identify our players that are multi-sport athletes that are not soccer primarily, and then having a good balance between their 2 sports. Obviously, we have our big matches. We have our matches where we can bring up some JV players and give our starting players a rest, and the same goes for track. So it's just coordinating a schedule keeping that line of communication open, whether it's text messages or word of mouth, that they've got something coming up. Injuries are always a concern for us just because they're both a high-intensity activity. So it's important that we keep them healthy, that we keep them balanced on the field, off the field, and that the coaches and the players are able to communicate clearly about where they'll be, when they'll be, and their status.
Mm-hmm. So do you communicate not only with your players but also with the coaches of that other sports that the kid's doing? Like the track coach, you have to communicate with him all.
Anchorage, Alaska is pretty small. We all know each other. A lot of our teachers are track teachers. I myself sub-teach on the side, so yeah, it's been great to get to know the Anchorage School District and the coaches and the teachers, and I've been here since 2010, so building that relationship with your activities principal, mm-hmm. and yeah, we're very lenient towards each other to help each other have successful seasons. Ultimately, it's about the player, keep them healthy, keep them happy, making sure their schoolwork gets done so that they can focus on their other activities.
Nice. Well, that's a perfect segue into our next question. And how do you guys keep high school soccer a priority?
Well, for us, like I said, our high school season's at the end of the year. Minimum GPA to play activities is 2.0 in Alaska, which isn't terribly tough for most kids, but it does keep them their eye on the goal, eye on the ball throughout the year. There are a lot of Alaska opportunities, whether it's outdoor activities, hunting, camping, whatnot, that take place. So it's always fun keeping the players focused on the sport of soccer. We got players that are dedicated that play year round. Players are more and more every year going out and playing college soccer. More and more club teams going out of the state of Alaska, winning tournaments out of state. So by the time they get to high school and they're getting to play with their buddies 5-6 days a week, they're usually just bouncing off the walls, ready to play. So keeping the game fun, keeping it competitive, it's something that they look forward to all year. We get out of our winter and into our spring, which for most people probably is pretty chilly, but for us it's pretty warm. And being able to get outdoors into the sunlight, that's the biggest motivator for us. Getting out of the gym when it's 40 degrees here, which is still pretty chilly, but indoors, 40 degrees outdoors is, like a sauna for us inside of a gym. So being able to get outdoors on a big field, playing the big game, getting to run a little bit, that in itself, the game is the biggest motivator for us.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy?
Yeah, so in Colorado, the high school soccer season is only 2.5 months long. So it's kind of but it's also the good thing because players really have those 9.5 months to really look towards high school season. The biggest thing is you want to add value to the high school experience. I've talked about that before. So making it, we have an excellent staff at Mountain Vista. At all 3 levels, we're able to field a fresh soft team, which is a great asset for us. But making sure that it still has that technical training that the players are going to get at club, so they still feel like they're getting better. Because that's definitely one of the things that high school players may look for, may not look for, is it going to be the same environment? And we do a good job at Vista of making sure it's at that level. Beyond that, just articulating the benefits of high school is extremely important. Being able to play under the lights, be able to play with different friends, be in a different system, getting that different training is huge. And I think a lot of players who miss out on high school kind of miss out on that extra experience. With that, all 3 levels, and I think this is the biggest thing, is make it a fun environment. And a lot of that is taken care of by just being able to play those games against different people, against your rival, your friends that play on your club team, but making it a fun experience for all 3 levels so you can keep as many players in your program and keep them into high school athletics, because that's kind of our main goal, is trying to pursue that excellence through athletics.
Mm-hmm.
In Alaska, we have a lot of, well, I'm sure as everybody does, there's always a lot of pride, but because we're off on our own part of the world and kind of cut off from everywhere else, it's a lot like club and country for professional players, where they've got to go play club in Europe and then they got to go back to their hometown and play for their colors or whatnot. So yeah, for a lot of these kids that play on various clubs, travel in town, out of town, whatnot, and then you get back to high school season and you're playing for your blue team or you're red team or whatnot. There's a lot of pride. So that's another main thing. We're waiting all year. We're indoors. It's cold. We're getting outdoors. It's summertime. We're playing the bigger field, and now you got kids playing against their buddy who they play club with. There's a big pride issue for Alaska, and it's always fun to have those matchups, to see the schools go through their swings of crop of players, and down swings and up swings, and it's always fun to see the players playing against each other whom they've played with their entire lives.
So it almost sounds like it kind of mirrors what they're going to expect in college in terms of dealing with going to school and then going to practice 5 days, 6 days a week, and then representing something else other than a club.
Absolutely.
Representing their school.
And we definitely try and tell them that this is the closest training environment that you're going to get at the next level if you're considering playing there. Is that student-athlete relationship is huge, being that student, taking care of your academic portion. But then again, getting into that, like we touched on, those rivalry games are huge. Being able to just get that extra experience is a great training for them for the later stages.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, training 5 days a week, it's more like a job. You got schoolwork. It's a little bit easier in high school because you're at school from 7 to 2, and then you go off to high school, and then you go home, whereas college, there's a lot more free time in between classes, but it's definitely a full-time job. We try and get their priorities right. They need to stay organized with their schoolwork first and foremost. Without the schoolwork, they won't go anywhere else. Largely for Alaska, and only 10% of the players will go off to play college at the next level, so academics has got to be priority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So our next question is has the academy system affected your player pool at all? And if it has, how?
For us, where I'm located, we're in kind of a hotbed area of soccer, which is definitely a nice thing to have. We have about maybe 2 players a year that may play academy eventually for their high school career. Beyond just those extra players, those quality talent players, it's still the same game. It's still relatively the same level. You still have those intense matchups, games, but everyone really has to deal with it. The tough part is that those academy players get to see their friends and get to see them come out for this high school experience, and they're missing out on it. That's the tough thing. They don't get to experience that extra preparation for the next level, that little extra piece, and it's really only that 2-month window that they get to see. But it's tough to see those players who love the high school game. We've had players come through that bleed Mountain Vista soccer for their freshman year, sophomore year, and then they just can't play just based on the rules. So it does become tough, but everyone's got to deal with it, and you just kind of you go forward and you put the best quality 11 out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we unfortunately haven't developed that far along as far as having an academy program. For player development in Alaska, high school soccer is the next stage. We got freshmen coming in that don't have any of their club teams in Anchorage that compete with them. They've all kind of molded to one team now in Anchorage. Their best competition now is either in Fairbanks, which is 6 hours north, or Kenai, which is 2 hours south. So by the time that they get to high school, there's only maybe 1 or 2 teams in that age group. So high school really does give us a platform for players for freshmen, top freshmen, to play against kids 3 or 4 years older than them. For players that are developing a little bit more, to get JV time where they're getting lots of playing time. They're playing a full 40, 80-minute game. They're playing against kids 1 to 2 years above them. And then for the varsity player, the games are still very competitive. It's largely athletic, but the soccer's gotten a lot better. But we just don't have an academy program to compete with. A lot of our top coaches coach high school soccer as well. So now we're sending off these players to those high schools with those quality coaches. They get to hear a different voice, but the only competition that we've had is outside academies or outside high school areas where they've got friends and family that live in Arizona or Georgia, and we've sent players there to Darlington Academy, and they'll do a couple years of high school there to kind of get them ready for college, and then they're off to college. But no, fortunately or unfortunately, all the best players are in one area. So I guess that's the best thing for us, is that we do have high school kids that are at the top of their game, competing and representing the state of Alaska, and kind of teaching the younger kids there. But we've only had probably maybe like 5% go out of state, middle of high school, live somewhere else with their cousins or family to kind of play at the next level, or be recruited by an academy like Darlington. We've got really good, strong relationships with Darlington Academy out of Rome, Georgia. Every summer their coach comes up, and it's been great. We were able to send players off. Dylan Faber playing in college ball his junior year, and a couple other players now making their jump into college as freshmen.
Great. How often and important is communication and cooperation between you and your club teams, your players' club teams?
It's absolutely imperative. Like I said, Alaska is very small. That the club coaches know each other on a first-name basis. We're already eyeing out who's going to be at whose school in the future years. We always talk about that, especially with my 04 girls. We're always joking about who's at Service, who's at South, who's at Diamond, who's at West. So it's always fun to have that little jabs and get to know the coaches a little bit. There's always a little bit of just like you have national teams and club teams. I hear Diego Costa is going to play 3 teams for Chelsea, and now he's got 2 games for Spain. And there's always a little bit of back and forth of how for the players' well-being, club over country. So that happens very rarely, but there's an occasional time where a team is traveling mid-season and they need to get a practice in on a Sunday. We're 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. So, keeping that balance is always important. There's always a little bit of concern when a player's playing in a scrimmage on Sunday and gets injured, and you got a game on Monday for high school. So that's always been a little bit of it's always going to be an issue, I imagine. Even at the highest ranks, it's always balance for the players, keeping them healthy. Obviously, Angel Di Maria in the World Cup, everybody heard about Real Madrid pulling him out, and it's hard to imagine. Your World Cup final, and I don't care who you are, I'm playing for my country, and that's that. But communication, like I said at the very beginning of the season, we all know each other very well on a first-name basis. Players know coaches, coaches know coaches, and then just keeping a player healthy, keeping them balanced, making sure their schoolwork's done, and then you're going to have to deal with any injuries or anything that happens, which it can happen on the field, it can happen off the field just as easy.
Mm-hmm. Jeremy?
I think a lot of the same in kind of my general area is you contact those coaches early, trying to figure out your training schedule based on that, because like Barrett touched on, is that the biggest enemy is overuse, overtraining really, as that's our biggest enemy. Usually the high school season is very separated. We really don't have any overlap on the boys side. The girls side with ECNL players, we get quite a bit more, but that's definitely where that communication comes in handy, and definitely making sure that you plan ahead in terms of what games, who's playing what, who's resting that game in case of they went out of state for a tournament. But it's definitely a big issue, and definitely communication is an important part of it. We also talk to the players about definitely letting us know when they're out of town. They are just as responsible as we are, is making sure that we understand that, hey, I have a scrimmage this weekend, or I have something this weekend. Just letting you know so you can kind of plan for that, and that's a big responsibility on the coach to make sure that those overtraining injuries just don't happen.
Great. So how do you guys utilize your JV program? Is it a place to build players up, or simply a place to keep lesser athletes involved?
Sure. And I've been at a couple schools where we've had 3 levels. I've been at a school where we've only had 2 levels, and it's definitely one of those systems that's in place. It's a tool for the coach to use as much as possible. Trying to keep as many players in the program is definitely our philosophy in it. Because the more players you have in it, the more chances that you have at creating that next best player. I've had many occasions where, more on the boys side than the girls side, but definitely on both, where a player is made fresh off for the 3rd level team, and the next year they make varsity. There are those occasions that it happens. A lot about, I touched on earlier about our coaching staff, a lot's about skill development too. In those lower levels, the JV program, the fresh off program, we want to get them ready to be able to handle that next level. So giving as quality a training environment as we possibly can to make sure that they're prepared for that next stage and hopefully they make it.
We try to make our program as closely related to a collegiate program as possible. My JV head coach is a former collegiate player. My cousin actually, who played at Northern Illinois. I myself played at Appalachian State. It's kind of funny going out there and taking the field because he and I are both very young players, whereas everybody else is, a little bit older than ourselves. So coming from that collegiate program where we have the background so closely related, we try to replicate that as much as we can at the high school level. Again, because we're off on our own a little bit more. Alaska is very unique, and we have a variety of games where you'll have top flight games, and you'll have games where you can use that as an opportunity to give some players a rest and bring up some JV players and get them some experience and give them an opportunity to try at the varsity level. Certainly throughout the season, we're always evaluating our players, JV and varsity. Coaches are heading to varsity games, coaches are heading to JV games so that we can support each other and watch the player development. We're always trying to think a couple of years ahead. It's never just about this season or right now. It's always about the program and its health in its entirety. So watching each other, helping each other, giving each other advice, giving players advice, giving some players rest in some games and bringing up some players from JV, or having JV players in the bench watching the top flight games and seeing what they can get their experience at. But we only have the boys side only has 2, the girls side has 3 teams in their age group. And again, like Jeremy touched on, getting his numbers out there, getting players touching the ball, getting players familiar with the program, getting players excited about going back to summer soccer, playing soccer somewhere at another level, training at another level, focused on, wanting to be at that place in the team this time next year. So players by the end of the high school season are usually pretty motivated to continue to play soccer, especially while it's sunny outside in Alaska, and continue their development, and hopefully next year's even more motivated than the year previous. They want to make the first team. They want to start. They want to be the striker. They want to be the goalkeeper or whatnot. There's a lot of pride in that. The fans we have are pretty fantastic no matter what the weather is. They come out there and they support their children. So we try and keep our program related to what we see at college. We try and keep everybody involved. We try and support each other's teams and keep track of player development as much as possible.
Great. We're going to move on to some questions from our viewers. So first one is from Anson Smith. He asks, how do you deal with players struggling academically? Suspension, train without playing?
Well, for us, the cutoff is 2.0. If you don't make that 2.0, there's not much I can do for you at that point in time. There's always 1 or 2 at the season. First 2 weeks, we have to come to training and tell them to grab their stuff, that they didn't make grades, and that's always a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of the boys, which is very good. I mean, it's a great motivator. 2.0 is not the hardest GPA to attain, but academics is one thing that there's a pretty fine line on. You either are here or you're there. Even if you're on the 2.1 scale or higher, it's obviously still important that you're paying attention to your grades. If you're getting trouble in class, that's obviously going to probably be sitting out for a day in practice. If it continues, then it's sitting out for a game and so on and so forth. But usually we keep a very close relationship with our players. We as coaches know where they are grade-wise. If they're in trouble, if they're struggling here and there, we're always happy to give them a practice off if they need to do some tutoring. But really, it's just about keeping that line of communication open and making sure that the players are getting their schoolwork done first.
Yeah, and we always touch on it at the beginning of the season that it's a student-athlete relationship. You're always a student first and an athlete second. We have weekly progress checks in terms of kind of where they're at. If they're on or close to the eligibility line, we kind of let them know, make sure that they understand, like, hey, you are getting close to this line. We need to make sure we figure that out. Make sure you have that conversation with students that if they're getting close, that do we need to set up tutoring? Do we need to maybe not make a practice and figure out what you need to do? Putting a lot of it's on disability. But giving them enough necessary tools to be successful is always kind of your goal as a coach. That's the important thing. If a player does become ineligible, and that's always that tough situation, is you still want them supporting the team, but the number one priority is always going to be academics. They need to make sure that they figure that part out, and giving them the tools. So make sure if it's a week off from soccer and then come back once the grade's back up, that's a necessary part of it. You're always trying to make sure that they're successful in their school aspect first, and then work on the soccer part.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Attendance is important too. We keep track of attendance weekly for games, especially if a kid misses school. They know they can't play, so that's something that we describe at the very beginning. You know, if they miss a class, even if it's practice, then you miss practice. You know, so they know what's on the line. You know, that line of communication at the beginning, establishing what you can do and what you shouldn't do, and they're high school kids. They know what they can get away with, and they know that they may get in trouble with it. And you know, if it puts their team at risk, then it's ultimately you know, hurting the team. So you know, it's important that the coaches establish, you know, you must make these grades, you must attend these classes, even if it's your last period, you can't skip out on it because now you're putting the team in jeopardy. Practice is even more important sometimes in games because that's where you learn the skills, that's where we work on the things. We get a variety of competition, top flight and non-top flight, so it's important that the players are attending practice and learning some things that we try to instill the philosophy of our team play. And like Jeremy said, academics first. You know, it's student athlete. 10% of these kids will go on to the next level. Majority of these kids will be, you know, decorated high school players. So it's important that they keep their academics focused first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the biggest thing is definitely attack it from the very beginning. Explain the consequences that if you're ineligible for a week, you miss 2 games, and that might be the 2 most important games of the season where you're playing your rival high school. Make sure that they understand the consequences of kind of not making up that test or not figuring out their homework. It's always stressing the importance from the very beginning is always the best way.
Awesome. So I think we have time for one more viewer. So where high school soccer is in relation to where it was 15 years ago?
I think for me,
well,
especially
I grew up in North Carolina. Good.
Oh, sorry.
No, by all means.
Okay. I had the opportunity to play and kind of coach in kind of that same area, which has been a blessing. Relatively, in terms of skill-wise, it's about honestly around where it was. It's tough to say because you're missing that caliber of athlete that wants to play academy, but you're still getting those extra athletes that come in from their freshman year and develop. So it's just in terms of that coaching staff working to find those diamonds in the rough that can help your program a little bit more. Obviously, it's been affected, but it's still relatively the level is the same. I will say, in terms of players, there's a little bit not more commitment, but players are having more opportunities to be successful outside of high school and in high school as well. But they're just having those more opportunities to play with different avenues, whether it's indoor 3v3 tournaments. There's just a lot of different ways that they can technically. So it's still kind of around the same level for us.
Being from North Carolina, I've been in Alaska since 2008. I've coached high school since 2010. I've seen dramatic changes in the past 4 years, and I'm sure, you know, multiply that by another 10 years, and players, you know, coaches will tell you how much it's changed even more. For us, the big important change was facilities. Just about 6 years ago, they didn't have an indoor facility to play at that was a full field. We had a lot of 8v8 or 7v7 small-sided, or even worse, or not worse, but you had gym training. Everything was futsal and, you know, 5v5, and there wasn't that, you know, offensive third, defensive third, middle third. You can never really run at full pace. So having an indoor facility that we have called the Alaska Dome, where it's a massive field, we get 11v11 games in, we get more 9v9 games in, especially in between for those players making that transition to 8v8 to 9 to 11v11. I think it's changed dramatically. The quality of players that we have, club players that play year in and year out and dedicate their time to soccer primarily, has been absolutely massive in getting the quality of our game risen every year. We see it every year. Freshmen, when they come to class, or freshmen when they come into training, they've got all their gear. They've got 2 different shoes. They've got, you know, ball pumped up with air. They've got water. the varsity players are coming in forgetting their boots, forgot their shorts. The ball is, oh, I don't have a ball. It's they rely on us. So, every year we see those kids. They come in, they're a little bit more prepared. Their homework is done. You can see that they were raised right, and it's just the hard work we put in 5 years ago is showing at the freshman level compared to what you see at the seniors. And then just the quality of the game. There's less throw-ins. There's more possession. There's more passes back to your keeper and building out the back, as opposed to the keeper just kicking it and everybody running the ball down. And then obviously having our own turf. Just a few years ago, there were still 3 high school teams in Anchorage that didn't have their home turf. They were playing on other people's turf. They were stuck in a gym. So having each high school having their own full-size turf soccer field, not just soccer, but stadium, players where fans can come out and watch. So the facilities for us have been a big thing. We're because it's in the snow a lot, it's nice to have indoor facility train. It's nice to have your outdoor facility to train onto when it's April and the sun is beaming out. And then like I said, the quality of the game has gotten better. The quality of coaches has gotten better. So things are on the up and up in Alaska, and we've got more club teams winning tournaments out of state and competing well. We come from the toughest region, in my opinion. And I come from a tough region with North Carolina, so I think it's very impressive to see us go out in California and Colorado and Arizona and show that Alaska can compete. And it's credit to our players, our coaches, and the facilities.
Great. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. So thank you again to Jeremy and Barrett and our guests today and our viewers. And a reminder that registration is open for the 2015 NSCAA convention. It's being held in Philly, January 14th to the 18th. So you can visit our website, nscaaconvention.com, for more information. Register today. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you at our next 30 Under 30 live chat.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, thanks.